Hey everyone, so I just wanted to do a little bit of a writing review, especially as we are creeping closer to our first major writing assignment. We need to go over a couple of important do's and don'ts first. I'm going to do that by first tackling basic paragraphs, and then I'm going to go into introductions and conclusions, and I'm going to hit a couple of things along the way. So, bear with me, there's just quite a few things I want to go over and make sure that we're all clear on the expectations before we start writing. So, at the high school level, about 9th, 10th grade, we're looking at a solid paragraph, maybe 5 to 7 sentences, give or take. When you're looking at maybe an 11th to 12th grade level, going into college in particular, you're looking at more of a 7 to 9 sentence range. And the difference there is you should be increasing your explanations. You should be developing that analysis and continuously moving towards having more full, in-depth analysis, which is going to not only lengthen your essays, but strengthen them as well. It's not really important how long something is. It's more important if it does what it says it's going to do, which means you need to have certain bits and pieces as you start with writing to accomplish that particular mission. So where you're going to get the majority of your strength in your essay is going to be in those body paragraphs. So in your body paragraphs, you should have 4 basic parts. That doesn't mean that's the only parts. It doesn't mean this is the order they absolutely need to go in, but it is, for the most part, a solid way to start your writing if you're not sure where to start, and it's a good checklist to make sure you have all the things you will absolutely need. So I don't know if you guys have heard me mention the concept of PEAL. I've mentioned it quite a few classes at this point, but just to be clear, PEAL is an acronym that stands for P point, E evidence, E explanation, and L link. So the point is your sentence that literally tells me what you are arguing in that particular paragraph. And this is normally directly connected to your thesis statement, but we'll get back to thesis statements here in a little minute. Then you are going to be looking at maybe what kind of length this needs to be. So when you're looking at a point part of your paragraph, it should really only be about a sentence or two, and it should only start ranging into the 2-sentence range when it's a complex idea that needs a little bit more detail in that second sentence. If you really need to warm up into things and do that and have all these extra bits and pieces, that's fine as long as it's effective. But make sure you're carrying the argument forward. Don't just keep saying the same thing with different words. You guys think somehow that's continuing the conversation, but it's not. You just say the same thing repeatedly. You need to move forward. You need to answer different questions as you progress through your essay. So first of all, you have a point. Then your next job is going to be to provide evidence. So my next question is going to be, well, why do you think that? So you need to pull evidence to show me this is why I think this particular point is true. This piece of evidence shows this point. When you're doing this, you want to pull a very small quote, 10 words or less. And this is only because it gives you more time to analyze those words and analyze them effectively rather than putting super large chunks of text that you end up not analyzing. So help yourself and kind of max that out at 10 words. That means you're going to have to go in and find the very best pieces of quotes. And remember, you don't have to use full quotes. You don't have to use full sentences. You can use a couple of words and it do the same job as a lengthy quote would have done. And it does it more effectively, and it gives you more time to actually analyze what it is doing, not just that it exists. So that should be about a sentence. Then you're going to move on to the most important part of your paragraph, which again is going to be that explanation, that analysis portion. In that analysis portion, in that explanation portion, it's going to be the longest. So potentially anywhere from, I would say, minimum 2 sentences on a very weak paragraph. And that can range as much as it needs to, but I would say like 2 to 5 sentences is a really solid range to be thinking about for your analysis portion of your writing. Again, 2 sentences has a very weak setup, but that is going to be, again, closer to what you're going to do in like 9th and 10th grade. If you're in 11th or 12th, this is going to be more of a, you should be ranging your stuff in like the 3 to 5 sentence-ish range. And this is where you're going to answer one of 2 questions. You're either going to explain how your evidence expresses your point, how it proves that point, or why that is important. Ideally, you'll be answering both of those questions. So you explain how that evidence supports your point, but you're also explaining why this is important, why you bothered to argue it in the first place. And again, all of this should be connected to your thesis statement, which again, I didn't forget about. We are going to go back to it. Finally, once you get through the really tough analysis portion, guys, this is where you should be struggling. You shouldn't be struggling with a point. You shouldn't be struggling with finding your evidence. The analysis portion, the explanation portion should be where you struggle. It's because you are creating independent, thoughtful things. This is where you should put the most effort into your writing because this is the most important part. So keep that in mind when you write, that the analysis or the explanation is the most important part. Finally, you should have what is known as a link. So if this isn't a full-length essay, this will be a sentence that transitions and closes out the idea that you've just presented, but then it kind of connects to the next idea. If this is a paragraph by itself, this link can be transitioned into just a wrap-up or conclusion-style sentence. So now that you've proved this, what can you say? What's that final thought there that you want me to be left with? Because remember, that's the last thing I'm reading out of your essay, so it should be at least thought-provoking, or at the very, very least, make sure that your point is clear. It shouldn't repeat your point, but it should make sure that your point is clear now that you've done all this work, this legwork, this thinking through the process of writing. And that doesn't mean, guys, that once you write it, it should be done. It is a process. Writing is about writing and revising. It should not be perfect, and it will not be perfect the first time you write. You should go back and look over things as you're continuing to write, as you are getting close to turning things in. One thing I do when I'm struggling to get my next paragraph started, I read back over what I've written so far, and it kind of gives me some ideas on what I might want to talk about next. Next, let's go ahead and just cover a little bit of do's and don'ts that I see in these paragraphs. So you guys love to use contractions. In formal writing, we should not use contractions. Remember not to use authors' first names if you have access to them. You should always call an author by their last name or their full name. They're not your friend. You don't know them, so you should refer to them by their last name or their full name. You should write, when we're talking about formal writing, that means no contractions, but that also means that you should be writing in the third person. So don't say I think, I believe, I know. First of all, I know that that's what you think, know, or believe, because your name is at the top of the page. Your name is at the top of the page because you are the writer. You are writing this is because, or what you're writing is based on what you believe and think. So I know that that's what you're trying to tell me, so just go ahead and tell me. Argue your point. You don't have to say, I think, I feel, I believe. I know. Your name is at the top of the paper. You're telling me that by writing what you're writing, that that's what you think, feel, believe. So third person because it's formal, and also because it's a little redundant. I know that that's what you think, feel, or believe because your name, again, is at the top of the paper. You are the writer. You are the thinker behind these ideas. The word it. I despise the word it. The reason is, when you use the word it, you're not telling me exactly what it represents. I will circle it every time and ask you, what is it? Be specific. When you are writing, you should always be specific and avoid vagueness. So vague means not specific. Don't use lots of pronouns. like he, she, or it. Specifically, don't use it at all, preferably, because it does not provide you enough information. It's very easy to get lost in a paragraph or an essay that uses it constantly, because it's hard to keep track of what the it is referring to. So just in general, be mindful of that. And again, that vagueness. Keep going. Do not stop at some kind of very, very obvious point. Make a point, argue something, tell me your opinion about that topic, because that's what writing is all about, is sharing opinions with other people based on what you believe to see if they agree or disagree, how they can add to the conversation as well. Moving on to general introduction and conclusion type things. Before I do that, actually, citing. When you are writing in an essay, and you use evidence from another person, or you use a piece of text from another person that is not you, you need to cite. So at the end of the sentence that has the citation in it, the quoted piece of information in it, you need to have parentheses at the very end before the period, and you need to write the author's last name and the page number that you got that information from. So if you are looking at a document that I've passed out in class, if there's page numbers on it, use those page numbers. If there's not, just tell me what page of the document you got it from. If it's a piece, a scanned version of something from a textbook, you can use that page number. That is fine. Plays will be a little bit different, but when we get to plays, I will discuss separately what those need to look like. But right now, all you need to know is the author's last name and the page number need to be the key focus. The details of that particular citation needs to be there. It shows that this is the person who thought this idea or created this idea. I'm just borrowing it. If you don't do that, that is called plagiarism. If you plan on going to college, they will put you on academic probation, and if you do it again, some colleges, if they put you on academic probation first, if you do it again, they will kick you out and you will not be able to attend another college. So keep that in mind. You need to learn how to do this successfully now, because some professors say if you do it wrong once, that's an F, that's a 0, like, not my problem. So for introductions and conclusions, so for introductions, you guys love to write me these long, extensive introductions. Focus your efforts on your paragraphs, your actual thoughts, your actual ideas and explanations. Do not write me this long, extensive introduction paragraph and be like, I don't know how to start. Start with your idea. What is your thesis statement? What are you trying to tell me? I don't care if your thesis statement is your whole introduction is one sentence, as long as it's that thesis statement. Tell me what you're trying to tell me and move forward. If you just absolutely have to write a good introduction, then write one. But don't focus so much on the introduction and pulling the reader in. Guys, I promise you, I have to read your essay whether I like it or not, whether it's interesting or not, whether you have an introduction or not. So please make sure that your thesis statement is solid, that you have a point that's arguable, that you're going to tell me what you're trying to tell me, and then move on. Just rip that Band-Aid off and move on. A solid introduction paragraph should be, for the length of essay you're writing, 3 to 5 sentences tops. And I typically lean more towards 3. It just needs to be solid and functional. It doesn't need to be fluffy. It doesn't need to be extra. For conclusions, on the other hand, conclusions, you guys typically see a conclusion as refreshing my memory or recapping everything you just told me. Your essays are very short, okay? So I promise you, from the top of the page to the end of your essay, I remember what you said. So assume that I remember exactly what you said. You don't have to recap it for me. What you should do in a conclusion paragraph is tell me why that was important that you argued this point and now have proven it. So what can you say now? Answer the question, so what? Why is this important? Why is it important that I brought this to Miss Jenkins' attention? Why should she care? Think about those questions as you're writing a conclusion. So I've proven this idea, so what? Why is that important? When you start thinking about that, your conclusion becomes a very important part and a very purposeful part of your writing, rather than a really quick introduction and almost a repeated version of your introduction. So conclusions do something, and they should be very purposeful. They are typically a little bit more difficult to write, because now that you've done all this hard work in your essay, you're like, okay, so now what? Why is this important? And that's a really important stage of the writing process to get to. Why is what I'm saying important to other people? So you're going to struggle a little bit with your conclusions. You're going to struggle answering the question why, and that is okay. That is what writing is all about. If you're not struggling, if you just glide everything onto the page, I have a lot of questions, because I want to know how you do it, because I can't do it that way. I have lots of questions. So just keep in mind, guys, that writing is supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be easy. So when you struggle with writing, you're doing it right. Don't panic the fact that, this is hard, I don't know what to say next. That's half the battle, figuring out what to say next. So if there are any other specific things I can focus on and help you with, let me know. Let me actually talk about thesis statements a little bit before we go. So a thesis statement. Thesis statements are literally what you are arguing in your paper. That means it has to be arguable. It has to be an opinion. It cannot be a fact. So don't just tell me, for example, if you're taking English 4 with me, don't tell me Beowulf is the hero. I know that. I know that he's the protagonist. That's not an arguable statement. You can argue about his character or what that means. That would be one thing. But don't argue something obvious that's really factual, because all I can say is you're right. There's nothing else I can say to that. That's not a conversation. That's a statement. That's a fact. If you're taking English 2 with me, for example, if you wanted to argue that Phillis Wheatley only meant the literal meaning, sorry, words were struggling there. She only meant the literal meaning of the text that we looked at, not the ironic or sarcastic meaning. Tell me that. Argue that with me. That's fine. That is an opinion. That is your opinion based on what you have read in the text. But don't tell me Phillis Wheatley was enslaved. That is a fact. That's not an arguable statement. Don't say she was affected by the way she was enslaved, or the situation of her life. Well, yes, that's a fact, once again. Now, if you tell me something specific about her life that did something to her writing, that would be an arguable statement, because your opinion is, because of this, this is what happened. This is how it affected her writing, for example. Be very specific in your thesis statements. So think about that process of writing a theme for a text, okay? You can use your themes as thesis statements if you do them properly. So you should be able to use your theme notes to also come up with a pretty solid thesis statement to write about. And we are going to be getting really close to doing a Socratic seminar. So in person, we're going to have discussions. Online, I'm going to have you guys just respond to a few questions and respond to each other, responding to those questions. So keep a lookout for those things as we get closer and closer. But again, guys, writing is supposed to be kind of hard, so don't be discouraged if it's difficult or you're trying but it's still hard. It's because it's supposed to be. It's not something that should be easy. And if you are, again, easily doing it, I have so many questions and I want to know how you do it. Please be in contact with any questions, guys. I know I say that with every video, but some people still aren't contacting me and they're struggling, and I see it. And I want to help, but I don't know that you need help until things are turned in. In class, I can see that you're struggling, but online, I can't. I can't watch you do work. I can't see you struggling. So you have to give me a heads up. You have to let me know. Again, I'd be happy to review anything you need me to. Contact me. I'm available. Let me know. All right, guys, so I guess that's it for now. See y'all. Be good.